You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with assistant editor at the Sunday Mirror, Laura Armstrong, and former Conservative Special Advisor, Anita Boateng. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. The Sunday Telegraph says that a group of top lawyers in the Tory party have studied the Prime Minister's Rwanda migration plan and concluded that it's still not fit for purpose and not watertight enough if challenged in the courts. The Sunday Express leads with a message from Rishi Sunak to Labour, challenging them to back his scheme if they're really serious about ending the small boats crisis. The Observer reports that Labour is to toughen up its policy on the Israel-Hamas conflict, with Shadow Foreign Secretary David Lammy to deliver the party's strongest criticism yet of Israel over its attacks on Palestinians and the destruction in Gaza. The Sunday Times leads with a study by the Centre for Social Justice, which concludes that the COVID pandemic has left the UK divided into two nations, similar to the Victorian era. The Sunday People says that England fans could be facing a beer drinking ban at next year's European Football Championships in Germany. The Mirror has a story about former boxer David Haye's apparent relationship with Coronation Street star Helen Flanagan, even though he's still seeing somebody else. The Sun says that I'm a Celebrity contestant Danielle Harold needed medical treatment after a serious health scare in the jungle, but was able to carry on. And finally, The Star tells us that AI chatbots are useless when it comes to thinking up chat-up lines to use on someone you fancy. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by Laura Armstrong and Anita Boateng. Welcome to you both, giggling at that last headline. We won't be discussing that, I don't think. Let's start with more serious matters and having a look at the Observer front page. And it's really about it's seemingly a change of tact from Labour in terms of their pronouncements on the war between Israel and Hamas. David Lammy is quoted. Laura.
Yes, so this is Labour's strongest criticism of Israel that it's made so far. The piece makes it very clear that in saying this, David Lammy has the full backing of Keir Starmer. It feels to me like this was sort of waiting to happen. Obviously, there was a lot of controversy over Keir Starmer's decision to not call for a ceasefire, with nearly a quarter of MPs, Labour MPs publicly calling for that. And it seems like he sort of bided his time a little bit and waited, and this is a real moment to do this, as the US have vetoed that ceasefire, as we're seeing humanitarian trucks being sort of overcome with desperate people rolling into Gaza. Feels like this is a very particular move and one he's been waiting to make for a while.
Yes, he's describing the death and destruction in Gaza over the past 2 months as intolerable and attacking two far-right Israeli cabinet ministers for totally unacceptable support of illegal settlements in the West Bank.
Yes, although I think I see this as a bit more smoke and mirrors, Gillian, because the criticism here is really about the conduct in the West Bank, and a lot of the controversy when it comes to the Western response is really about the operation in Gaza and the attempt to get rid of Hamas leadership. But on the West Bank, I think most people would say that what Israel have been doing is pretty intolerable. Lord Cameron, the new Foreign Secretary, just a couple of weeks ago talked about the unacceptable violence in the West Bank. So it doesn't feel like that the Labour Party is particularly out of step with the government on its position with what Israel has been doing in the West Bank, particularly around the settlements. And it's worth reminding your viewers that really the levels of deprivation and violence and anarchy that are going on in the West Bank right now is sort of been pushed to the side because of the focus on the operation in Gaza. But you have conditions there that some say are kind of worse than they were in the pandemic, you know, shoplifting becoming endemic, pandemic and all sorts of real structural problems in the West Bank. So I think good on Labour for drawing attention to the fact that the West Bank has serious challenges. But I think it's more about the briefing in we're being very tough on Israel to settle some of those nerves across the party that want a ceasefire rather than a material difference in where Labour's positioning itself.
But seemingly he is also talking specifically about the death and destruction in Gaza as well.
Yeah.
Being intolerable.
Yeah.
Just to be clear. Let's move on to the Express and Rwanda, the country that's going to be on the lips of many next week with that vote coming in. But what we're reading here is that Rishi Sunak is really laying down the gauntlet to Labour and saying that if they really cared about the country and this issue, they would support the government.
This felt quite desperate to me. It feels like there's a level of serious worry there that we're reading about across the papers that this isn't going to work. Obviously, you've got legal advisors saying there's only a 50% chance of these planes taking off. And ahead of this vote, it feels to me that Rishi is panicking a little bit and saying, actually, over to you, and sort of taking the focus a little bit off what's happening at home.
Well, from what we've read thus far, Anita, the party is extremely divided over this and the vote could be quite close.
Yes, and it's pretty extraordinary to think that you could have a second reading vote be under this amount of kind of scrutiny and uncertainty. For what it's worth, I do think it will pass second reading, but the question becomes what happens when it survived contact with the Lords in particular, where you might see a series of amendments and defeats that make the bill much more difficult to deliver any of its intentions. So I think this is a real challenging moment. Now, on the defiant challenge to Labour, never miss an opportunity to make the point, right, that Labour doesn't really, what's its position on the small boats crisis? But yes, as Lucy says, is this the heart of the challenge? No, it's more on the Conservative side.
Yeah, it's not really about Labour at this point in time. Laura, do you see this as a real challenge to Rishi Sunak's premiership?
I do, yeah. I think that this has dominated headlines now for a week, and it's emerging more and more as something that is, the central focus. And I think that there's also been a series of blows. You've obviously got Robert Jenrick this week. That's a real blow for the Prime Minister, especially for a politician that was previously one of his greatest allies. And, these sort of hard-hitting quotes that we're seeing, that this is the triumph of hope over experience for the bill, saying that the Tories are risking, the red-hot fire of being beaten in an election if they continue along this path. So I think that there have been a series of blows this week, and yes, I think it's very serious. There'll be a lot of eyes on Tuesday for sure.
Anita, let's move to the Telegraph and speaking more to the divisions within the Conservative Party. They're talking about a star chamber of Conservative lawyers that are saying that Sunak's deportation plans are not fit for purpose.
Yes, the Conservative Party does rather love a star chamber. So, yes, this is a gathering of legal people who have actually done this in the past over the Brexit bill, over the deal with Northern Ireland. There are always these moments where this group sort of gets together and decides whether they're happy with the current proposals from the government. So, yeah, what they're saying is that the legislation is insufficiently watertight to avoid any legal challenges coming from illegal migrants wanting to remain in the UK and not being, sent to Rwanda. And it feels as though this is partly the Robert Jenrick story. Laura just mentioned, Jenrick positioning himself as saying he doesn't think this bill is really going to work. That's what this Star Chamber is also saying, which is that this bill is not going to kind of kill stone dead any threats of legal challenge to the bill. There is also this really interesting nugget in this story from Suella Braverman, the former Home Secretary, who says that pours doubt or questions Sunak's claim that if the bill were to go further and to specifically talk about getting the UK out of the ECHR, for instance, that Rwanda would not be happy with that. She says that's a rather strange claim. And so this is part of the thing that Sunak and his team have been arguing as a bulwark against those who think the bill should be tougher and saying, well, the Rwandese would not accept that. So if that shifts in the next coming week, then I think that could be potentially quite quite explosive.
But isn't that something that the Rwandans have said themselves, that the deal could be collapsed?
Yes, I mean, it's slightly strange because I have sort of been watching this and read Jenric's resignation letter with interest, going, well, if it goes further, surely the issue is Rwanda. It doesn't matter if the bill is tougher if Rwanda then says, I'm backing out because we don't like the kind of where the bill's going. So there is something very interesting at the heart of this matter, which is specifically on this point about could the bill be toughened up realistically?
So that's the previous Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, Robert Jenrick, and the Star Chamber saying that it's not tough enough. It doesn't go far enough. It doesn't bode well for Tuesday, does it?
It doesn't, no. And I think that there's also been a lot of noise around the Star Chamber that Tory MPs were waiting to hear what the Tory party said. As Anita said, they do love a Star Chamber. So I think a lot of people were keeping their powder dry to see what this verdict was going to be. So the fact that this has come back now will be yet another slap. And you've obviously got Suella here talking in the Sunday Telegraph, echoing the concerns of Robert Jenrick, so, particularly over the fact that this bill still allows legal challenges by individual migrants. She's taking that further than he did in his resignation letter and saying that it could actually add 6 months to each of these appeals. So it's sort of hit after hit for the Prime Minister at this point, I think.
Anita, take us to the Sunday Times, and this is a study done by the Centre for Social Justice, just saying that the pandemic has left Britain with a social divide that mirrors Victorian times.
Yes, this is a really fascinating study by the Centre for Social Justice, which is kind of the theme that we've had throughout the kind of since responding to the pandemic, which is that existing trends have been dramatically escalated by virtue of the pandemic. So there are some remarkable statistics in here about how calls to domestic abuse helplines rose 700%, 1.2 million more people went on working age benefits, 86% of more people sought help for alcohol addiction. So it's really drawing attention to the fact that there are certain pockets, you know, fairly small pockets kind of numerically, but where you saw dramatic changes in their kind of profile and ability to weather some of the kind of more difficult times that have been faced since then and looking ahead to where the economy is going right now. So a really important look, I think, at some of the social fabric questions and the kind of public realm questions that have appeared since the pandemic.
OK. Anita and Laura, thank you very much for the moment. We're going to break now. Coming up, we'll be looking at the Royal Christmas card, which features on many of the front pages this evening, including the Daily Telegraph. Stay with us for more on that and other stories. Welcome back. You are watching the press preview. Still with me, Assistant Editor at the Sunday Mirror, Laura Armstrong, and the former Conservative Special Advisor, Anita Boateng. Let's take a look at the Express and this prediction of 2 back-to-back storms due to bring more floods and misery. Laura, I think it's your turn.
Yes, it's always casts kind of grimness into your heart to look at these stories, doesn't it, and realise what's coming for some people. Obviously, there's going to be a fairly miserable couple of weeks in certain areas of the country, and particularly as it's so cold. We all have those images in our minds of kind of waterlogged and flooded towns and people having to be rescued. So it's just hopefully people are prepared.
And the first storm is Ellen.
Yes, and the second one, Storm Fergus, are on their way. So 33 flood warnings, you know, that's you know, quite serious. And then the Met Office giving yellow warnings until 3 a.m. In the morning. So clearly these are going to be quite intense and cause masses of disruption and misery to so many.
I'm a celebrity. Get me out of here, Laura. You'll be contributing most of this thing because we've not watched any of it.
Yeah, well, I mean, for some people, this will be very interesting news. Millions of people watching the show, and this is Danielle Harold, who has only recently gone out in the last couple of days and was at one point quite widely tipped to win the show. And it turns out, The Sun reports that she's had this secret health scare while she's in there that has made her lose a stone in weight. It must have been quite horrible for her if she was experiencing that in there, but The Sun reports that she has battled through and managed to stick it out, so good for her.
And Anita, you've not been tempted to watch, even though Nigel Farage is still in?
Yes, I mean, I've heard tales of Nigel Farage sort of not wearing a shirt and dancing and flashing in the shower, but sadly that's weirdly not drawn me to watching the programme. But I mean, definitely good on her for sticking it out, because, you know, to be in front of the cameras in that kind of environment and also incredibly sick does not sound easy. So,
No.
you know, congratulations to her.
Let us finish off with this photo of the Royals. This is the official Christmas card, stylised. I think it is in black and white, or is that just how we've put it?
It is in black and white.
It is in black and white. Yeah, quite stylised, relaxed. Laura?
Do you know what? I have to be honest, like, when I saw this picture sort of flashed up during our conference, I was very disappointed, because you're expecting a bright, beautiful, really lovely picture that's going to look great on the front page or wherever you choose to put it, and the black and white was a bit of a disappointment for me, I'm going to be honest.
Really?
Yeah.
Don't think it's stylish?
I think it's very stylish, but I think I'm very conscious of how hard it is to make 5 people, especially when 3 of them are children, look nice. And I think it could have been a bit brighter.
Quite harsh, Anita.
Well, usually the Princess of Wales takes quite a lot of photos, and that's sometimes featured in the... So it's a bit of a shame that she didn't sort of do the artwork, because some of them have been quite fun over the years. I mean, I think everyone looks great in it, and I think we were just talking, the kids look so grown up now. Like, Prince George is like 10 years old, but I guess he looks incredibly smart and mature in this photo.
He's very tall, isn't he?
Yeah, he is tall. It's a lovely photo. Yes, maybe they could have thrown the boat out and gone for something more exciting, more challenging, but it's still a nice photo.
Not particularly Christmassy,
no.
although quite stylish, I'd say, the option for black and white. But, Laura, what would you have liked to see instead?
Just a colour version of exactly the same thing.
Oh, really? Okay.
I think it's a lovely picture of all of them, and I think it's just perhaps it's a newspaper perspective. I think it would look better on a page.
Anita, should there have been a Christmas tree in the background, some baubles, something of that nature?
I'm a fan of the photo that's taken in the summer. That just reminds me of summer times because it's so miserable and all the storms are coming. So, yeah, I think a bit of, like, energy, a bit of, like, family dynamics and
Let's take a quick
interaction would have
look
been
at
lovely.
the King's Christmas card in contrast, which is on screen now.
Yeah, that's full regalia.
Yes.
That's sort of pomp and ceremony, lots of red and opulence.
Yeah,
Why
I think
not?
that says Christmas a little bit more. Thank you both, Anita and Laura. We'll see you in the next hour. Thank you. Let's take a look at the weather for you now.